Tatakae Ouendan was a Nintendo-published rhythm beat game for the DS developed by Innis. Released in 2005 exclusively in Japan, the game earned a cult following around the world. Its popularity spawned a sequel and a westernized version named Elite Beat Agents made by the same team. In this video, I'll be exploring the history of the series, including its surprising origins, cut content, scrapped sequels, and much more. To gain greater insight into the games, I spoke at length with the people who made them, including series creator Keiichi Yano, who shed new light on their development. Innis was a small Japanese company founded in 1997 by Keiichi Yano, his wife Masako Harada, and her brother. After a few years spent building the company's resources, Innis made its debut in 2001 with Guitar-Man, a rhythm action game for PlayStation 2. They had partnered with publisher Koei to release it. According to its director Keiichi Yano, the developers were initially pleased with their efforts and excited to begin work on their next project. However, a serious blow was dealt to their confidence when, upon launch, the game moved very few copies. Guitar-Man's poor sales performance left Innis rethinking its place in the game industry and the viability of the music rhythm genre. Various new game concepts were experimented with until the developers finally struck upon one they found worth attempting. This new project, another brainchild of Yano's, was a music-based platformer. His idea was to continue capitalizing upon the studio's musical expertise while exploring a completely different genre. Prototypes for this concept were developed in which players would complete a platforming stage and the music would dynamically respond around their movements.
I got the idea of well, wouldn't it be cool if we had a platform game and all of the music kind of synced to all of your movements, much in the way that a Tom and Jerry cartoon might, when Tom or Jerry would animate, all the music used to get played against their animation, not the other way around.
Through a contact Yano had in Nintendo's business team, Innis was able to organize a meeting with the publisher to pitch this new game, but it was quickly shot down by them.
To make a very long story short, they thought our idea just sucked. They just completely thought it sucked.
It met the same fate as several other pitches Innis had made to Nintendo around this time. On the flip side, Nintendo did express an interest in some of their technology, and the experience allowed them to gain fresh contacts at the company. Innis spent some time after this continuing to pursue their musical platformer. Months were spent working on prototypes for it as they were in talks to produce it with another publisher. Ultimately, these discussions fell through, an event which Yano says sent morale at Innis plummeting. The company's prospects looked bleak. They hadn't had a new project picked up in over 2 years at this point. Looking to raise their spirits, the CEO of Innis, Masako Harada, suggested the developers have a change of scenery and visit Los Angeles for E3 2004. It was at this event that Nintendo revealed their latest handheld, the DS. After getting his hands on the new device, Keiichi Yano was hit with an epiphany. It would be the ideal venue for them to realize a game concept that had previously been pitched internally. About a year earlier, a team led by 2 graphic designers at Innis had presented an idea to Yano about Ouendan, a squad of Japanese male cheerleaders. The player would have taken up the duties of an Ouendan member who must help people in everyday situations by cheering them on to victory. Originally, it had been proposed not as a game for consoles, but as an arcade machine. The team wanted it to be played with 2 original peripherals called the fan controllers. Players would hold one in each hand, unfurling them in time with the music in various poses. Yano told me that he approved of the idea, and it went as far as being pitched to external companies. It was shelved due to a lack of interest from publishers. Reflecting upon the concept, Yano realized its newfound potential as a DS game. In his mind, it could leverage not only the touchscreen, but its 2-screen interface. Story could be displayed on the top screen and gameplay on the bottom. Back at Innis, the developers got to work with expanding the Ouendan game concept. They looked at real-life Ouendan for inspiration and derived the game's core aesthetic from their hot-blooded, determined attitude. This would later form the basis for their title as well, its first word, os, having connotations of perseverance and pushing oneself. For the time being though, the project's working title was simply Ouendan. At GDC 2007, Yano discussed his affection for the idea of using Ouendan in a game, and how it struck a chord with the mood of the studio during a period of hardship.
The Japanese image of the Ouendan basically really stand for all the good things, like standing for courage in the face of adversity and a spirit to fight on and never give up. And these were all the things that we really needed in the company at the time.
Their very first mission idea for the game was one that made it into the final product as the opening level. In it, the Ouendan cheer on a student frantically studying for his exams as he tries to get into college after many failed attempts. One of the other early scenarios under consideration showed the Ouendan cheering on people trying to stop a speeding train. Another had them trying to prevent a meteor from colliding with the Earth. The latter ended up becoming the game's final stage further down the line, while the former was used for their first gameplay demo. In this, the first stage to be realized in motion, the Ouendan do their best to inspire a group of bystanders trying to push back a runaway train in order to save a puppy sitting on the tracks. It was set to the Japanese pop song Koi no Dansite by Morning Musume. This visual demo, made in about a week using Flash, showed how the game would play on the DS. On the touchscreen, players would tap numbered circles in time with the music. Their performance would influence the events of the narrative on the top screen, with occasional breaks in the song to observe the story. Pleased with their demo, Innis decided they would take it to the biggest publisher they could, Nintendo. A board of Nintendo's producers watched as Kiichi Yano presented their ideas and played the demo video on a notebook. To get an idea of how tapping the hit markers would feel, Nintendo staff jabbed at Yano's notebook with a regular pen, inadvertently scratching up its screen in the process. Regardless, Nintendo approved of the concept and signed to develop it with Innis just days later. Shortly thereafter, the team learned that one of the Nintendo producers responsible for greenlighting it had himself been in Ouendan at his university. According to Yano, he later found out that one of the reasons Nintendo liked their pitch was its use of a Japanese concept called gekiga. Translating to dramatic pictures, this term essentially described the art style used in the hand-drawn sections of Ouendan, and how they captured the passionate, hot-blooded nature of its characters. Nintendo apparently had a fondness for this visual design, and admired how it stood apart from their other games. During early development on the project, it dawned upon Yano that the runaway train scenario they had presented to Nintendo could not be used in the game, due to a fundamental oversight in its design. They had not taken into account that they would need to include a negative outcome to the story if players failed the song. Had they done so, it would have had to show, or at least suggest, the puppy being hit by the train. Yano had no intention of having such a cruel scene in an otherwise fairly light-hearted Nintendo game, and so it had to be scrapped. On the other hand, the song used in it, Koi no Dansite, was kept for the final game and used in another stage. Choosing the track list for Ouendan and the games that followed it was a lengthy process, according to Yano. Innis approached it as though they were creating an album. The team compiled an initial list of 200 to 300 possible songs, slowly trimming it down to around 15. This involved trying out the tracks in many various combinations, seeing which would work best together and in which order, in addition to seeing which would be possible from a licensing standpoint. From the beginning, Yano had always intended to include a ballad, a slower song that would serve as a break from the game's energetic pop numbers. This manifested itself as a scenario using the song Over the Distance. It follows a grieving young girl being visited by the spirit of her dead boyfriend, who is trying to tell her he loves her a final time. Over the course of development, the Ouendan cast underwent a handful of changes. Originally, the main cheerleader from the game's normal difficulty, Ryuta Ippongi, had a somewhat different look. In the original prototype, he was portrayed as shirtless, with his gakuran open. His final design buttoned up his gakuran, gave him spikier hair, a new red hachimaki, and a matching armband. His sidekicks also underwent some tweaks. Atsushi's glasses were changed to an eye patch, and Itetsu's blonde mohawk was enlarged to make him stand out more in 3D. Work on Tatakae Ouendan lasted around 11 months before its July 2005 launch in Japan. Sales were initially slow, but positive word of mouth allowed it to grow and reach an unexpected new audience in the West. Thanks to the region-free capabilities of the DS, Western players had started importing the game in large numbers, despite its lack of an English language option. In our discussions, Yano told me that there were never any plans to directly localize the game for the West. Innis and Nintendo had ruled out that possibility early on. The game was so heavily entrenched in Japanese culture that it may not have translated well enough to Western audiences in order to be successful. For one, the very concept of Ouendan was not widely understood among Western audiences. The high costs of localization and licensing its fully Japanese soundtrack for a new region would have made it difficult to justify from a business standpoint. Meanwhile, the Western players who were interested in the game were already importing it.
If it were a different generation, we might have thought about it. Back then, I don't know if it would have made business sense at the end of the day.
With that said, Nintendo did believe there was potential for a new game to be made specifically for Western markets using Ouendan's gameplay. It was Nintendo of America in particular that reached out to Innis and suggested starting this new project with them. Initially uncertain, Yano and his team took some time to draft out ideas for this potential game. The start of this process involved looking back at Ouendan and examining the characters they had created. In Yano's words, they realized they had made a motley crew of different male dancers with their own distinct looks and personalities. When they tried to imagine what a Western equivalent of such a team would look like, they landed on American disco group The Village People. During the earliest phases of pre-production, their characters for this westernized take on Ouendan were indeed based entirely around the members of the Village People. The name of this new group of characters, which was also the project's codename, was the Disco Rangers.
We thought that the team, of guys like this, of a team like the Village People would be kind of interesting and fun to play. And we thought they had it all, they had a cop, they had a construction worker, they had Hell's Angels. What more could you ask for in a bunch of guys rooting you on?
As they explored the concept further, Innis discovered a fondness for the disco theme and looked at how it could be used visually. One piece of concept art depicted an idea for their countdown timer, showing silhouettes of the Rangers in different dance poses. These were directly inspired by Apple's iPod ads from 2004, which featured silhouettes dancing in front of brightly coloured backdrops. After a short while, Yano began doubting whether audiences would actually want to play as the Village People. This prompted a total rethink of their core concept. The solution, Yano says, came to him as he was on the verge of falling asleep one night. He had been thinking about fictional teams from Western culture with a similar dynamic to the Ouendan that he would enjoy playing as. The main three he came up with were the Ghostbusters, Men in Black, and the Blues Brothers. Pulling from these three sources of inspiration, Yano surmised that his new characters would likely be a task force whose agents are clad in black suits and sunglasses. They would also arrive on the scene in some kind of unusual vehicle and use a gold star as their logo.
I really thought that the star means a lot of things, and it means a lot of great things, I think, especially in the US. It means things like freedom and justice, and I wanted to really use that to represent kind of the ideas that these ideals that the agents would stand for.
The next ingredient in this cauldron of Western culture was found when Yano presented his ideas to Innis. They would look to the Austin Powers movies to inform the game's tone and sense of humor. With that in mind, the team started to understand that this new game's aesthetic would be very different from its predecessors. Whereas Ouendan was all about hot-blooded dancers with a burning passion to help those in need, the agents took a more cool, laid-back approach. This cool quality to the characters would inform key choices made about the game's design throughout development. In the team's first sketches of the agents, the artists initially channeled some more of the game's Blues Brothers influence, giving them a loose tie look. Having the agents dress in black like the Ouendan was a conscious design decision according to the game's creators. This was to create a contrast against the colourful hit markers, making them easier to distinguish. As the core concept was forming, the developers were exploring why the agents were helping out those in need with the power of music. Yano had proposed two possible reasons. The first, in a tribute to the Blues Brothers, was the idea that the agents were on a mission from God.
We're on a mission from God.
The other, which paid homage to another movie, Austin Powers, suggested they were simply on a mission to groove. Yano realized that these alone might not be compelling enough to motivate players through the story, and so a dispatcher character was created. Commander Khan was the head of the agency, directly inspired by Charlie from Charlie's Angels, who would send the agents to their objectives from his desk. His design was partly lifted from an earlier Disco Rangers sketch based around the policeman from the Village People. With this last element sliding into place, Innes's patchwork of Western cultural influences was complete. Even Commander Khan's catchphrase that kicks off each mission was itself a reference to the opening of Thunderbirds.
Agents are go!
At some point in the first phases of development, the Disco Rangers moniker was retired for good. It temporarily became known under another title, which was never shared with the public. Its internal codename at this time was SSA, which stood for Supersonic Agents. This name too was eventually dispensed with after a while. The project's heads apparently wanted something more original, and on a legal level had no intention of challenging Sega's claim to the name Supersonic. Instead, various suggestions were shared throughout the offices of Innes, and eventually Elite Beat Agents emerged as the favourite. Although the Sonic naming scheme did stick around long enough to inadvertently make it onto some material that was released to the public when it was first revealed. On a render of Agent J distributed to the gaming press, Sonic Agent can still be seen on his badge. This same model with the old SA badge can be spotted in this early screenshot as well. The first public footage of EBA from 2006 contains yet another reference to the Supersonic Agents. The text for completing a chain of beats with perfect accuracy in this gameplay was Supersonic 300, as opposed to Elite Beat 300 as it is in the final game. In the first build of Elite Beat Agents made available to the public at E3 2006, one feature was on display that was later removed. Once players racked up a certain combo of consecutive hits, a flame effect would build in the background behind the agents. In our talks, Yano explained why this was taken out mid-development.
The flame was originally from the Ouendan side, because they're hot-blooded and it's just like a lot of heat and things like that. With Elite Agents, it was more about cool. So I think at the time we made the decision that flames weren't exactly appropriate for the vibe we wanted to create with the characters. So I think that's why we cut it out. Yeah.
In a 2006 interview with Wired, Yano explained the team's approach towards the soundtrack in Elite Beat Agents. The concept for song selection was this: the roaring songs you want to hear if you went to a college frat party. I used to play in bands like that, and when the whole crowd is jumping up and down to your tunes, this is the essence of our selections. While Yano says Innes tried not to second guess their song list once it was settled upon, there were some songs that couldn't be included for reasons beyond their control. According to former Innes programmer Robert Oda Dieterich, one band that was at least discussed was Journey. This had been suggested to a planner on the project to some enthusiasm, but their music apparently wasn't made available to them by the license holders. Similarly, a source from Nintendo of America alleges that a Guns N' Roses song was also looked into. By far the most prominent of these rumors, however, suggests that Ricky Martin's Livin' La Vida Loca was among those that didn't make the cut. Some news outlets, such as the now defunct 1UP, reported in mid-2006 that the song would be a part of the game, citing statements made by Nintendo itself. By late 2006, these sites went quiet on the matter, and the track was absent from the final lineup, leaving behind a lasting mystery for fans. Was this an actual scrapped stage or simply hearsay? I put the question to Yano, who confirmed it was indeed real and was already being built into the game.
I think it was a licensing issue at the end of the day. But yeah, we had it in there for a while, during our testing to figure out, what the character design might be like, what the world might be like.
Robert Diederich chimed in on the matter as well, corroborating that licensing complications led to it being removed, and shared some of his memories of playing the lost level.
I do remember having like some long markers that would just like da 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 da. You can imagine it's like ba 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 da 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 right there in times with like the da 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 if you to look at it. Felt really good.
According to Diederich, the song was used in the very first prototype for Elite Beat Agents, and was attached to a scenario that did make it into the finished product. This mission saw the agents helping a movie director whose career is in jeopardy. The appropriately named Makes No Difference by Sum 41 later replaced the Ricky Martin track on this stage. Although the first Elite Beat Agents trailer released to the press in 2006 appears to show the original song in action. While Livin' La Vida Loca itself cannot be heard since the audio was replaced by guitar music, the video gives us a glimpse of the original beat layout, which is completely different from the final version. In summary, the very first footage of Elite Beat Agents glimpsed by the public teased a song that was not in the release game. It also showed off some early art for the spinners, the help panel, and alternate animations for the start of the song that more closely resemble those from Ouendan. Furthermore, it can be noted that the Hollywood sign in the original cutscene was later changed to Movie Land. This may have been in order to avoid legal issues since the real-life Hollywood sign is trademarked. In both the Ouendan games and Elite Beat Agents, there is an Easter egg in their respective training modes which, according to Robert Diederich, was implemented solely to mask a bug in the games. The training mode, which teaches you the basics of how to play the game, uses a looping beat which players are required to tap along in time with. During development, the team discovered that if they paused the training mode, the file for this metronome would sometimes inexplicably stop playing once the game was unpaused. To resolve this, rather than spending precious time trying to fix it, they simply remove the ability to pause the training mode. If the player closes their DS while training is in progress, the mode will be stopped. Upon opening it back up, the player is greeted by their instructor, either the Ouendan President Kai or Commander Khan depending on the game, who lambasts them for slacking off. The player is then kicked back to the main menu. This entire sequence exists to hide that the metronome cannot be reliably paused without the aforementioned bug occurring. In keeping with its Men in Black inspirations, Elite Beat Agents culminates with them going up against an alien invasion. A spacefaring race known as the Romulans takes over Earth, enslaving humanity and imposing a worldwide ban on music. Originally, this sequence was intended to be accompanied by a voiceover from the Romulan leader. This was later dropped from the game, replaced by text dialogue, but can still be found in the game's files and synced up to the cutscene.
We are the Romulans. Your pathetic planet is now ours. You are no longer free. You will obey us. From now on, all music is forbidden. Those who defy us will be turned to stone.
The former developers I spoke to believed that this was dropped simply because the project's heads thought the cinematic worked better without it. Elite Beat Agents released in November 2006 in North America, and a direct sequel to the original Ouendan followed shortly thereafter, launching in Japan in May 2007. Its name was Moiro Niketsu Rhythm Damashi Os Tatakae Ouendan 2, the meaning behind which Yano imparted at GDC 2007.
It loosely translates into burn hot-blooded rhythm soul. So we basically took all of the best words of all the favorite games that we liked and we put it into one game title. So you can't beat that, right?
As with the previous two games, its soundtrack was made up of cover versions of licensed music. According to one source from the project, Innes briefly encountered some issues with one of the covers made for Ouendan 2, Bong Bong Vacances by Japanese boy band SMAP. Prior to this song, the creator's approach to each cover was to try sticking as close to the original version as possible. An exception was made for this track when the licensees allegedly took issue with the initial results. During production, a cover version was apparently recorded using male vocalists, but the license holders believed it sounded too close to the original and asked Innes to redo it. Therefore, the cover was completely redone with female singers producing the version that appears in the final game. According to Robert Diederich, many of the 2D art panels in Ouendan 2 were redrawn on multiple occasions. This was a practice common across all three of the games, but the artists found themselves revising one part of the game in particular several times. This was the opening sequence of the 5th stage on the highest difficulty setting, which showed the Ouendan girls bathing in a hot spring. The developers apparently redid these drawings to give them more sex appeal, and were surprised to receive zero pushback from Nintendo on the matter.
I'm amazed what they let us do.
To date, Ouendan 2 is the last entry in the series, although, as I've discovered, there were seemingly plans for more. At the end of the credits roll in Elite Beat Agents, a "to be continued" message can be found, teasing a follow-up. I asked Yano if a sequel was actually once being planned, or if this message was simply wishful thinking on the part of the developers.
Well, it was a little bit of both. I mean, I think there was always the notion of, if you could create a franchise, let's do it kind of thing. So you always kind of, especially with Nintendo, you kind of build with the notion that that might be the case. So, I mean, I think it was partially wishful thinking and partially that, I mean, yes, we, were planning on doing some things, didn't quite pan out that way for various reasons. But yeah.
While those tentative plans for a DS sequel to EBA didn't move forward, Innes also discussed potentially bringing the IP to another platform, the Wii. I asked Yano to comment on rumours that such a game had been under consideration.
Well, I mean, without going too much into detail, there's a little bit of NDA information there, but yes, it was a little bit under consideration. We didn't end up doing anything, but yes, it was definitely a thought. Yeah.
At the very least, I was able to find that Innes had done some work relevant to the Wii platform, having had a small contribution to one of its biggest games. Super Smash Bros. Brawl features trophies of both Ouendan and Elite Beat Agents characters respectively. These 3D models were in fact made by Innes themselves, and were later used by them for various internal tests.
I do remember at one point when we were learning how to use Unreal Engine, someone grabbed Agent J and tossed him into Unreal. And I think it was like basically tossed him into a Gears of War map. So there was some point where Agent J is like dancing around, and I saw someone like shooting him with Marcus Phoenix.
Following the completion of Ouendan 2, Innes spent several years working with Microsoft creating the Lip series. According to former developers, however, it was early into the life cycle of the 3DS that Innes re-entered discussions with Nintendo. Their intentions were to produce a third Ouendan game for Nintendo's new handheld. A prototype was apparently made for such a game, although it was not built using 3DS hardware since Innes had yet to receive any. Ouendan 3 was pitched to Nintendo and ultimately was not picked up, say sources linked to the project. This would mark the final known attempt on the part of Innes to revive their Nintendo Rhythm Beat saga. The main reason as to why it never continued may be a fairly straightforward one.
It's the money thing. It's the kind of game, it sells okay. But more and more, it's sort of the nature of economics in the games industry. Like, okay profits are not really worth the effort, especially because okay can very quickly, just with a single mistake, can turn into just straight up minus. And so by that line, it becomes like a risky investment.
These sentiments are supported by the words of former Nintendo of America president Reggie Fils-Aimé. In a December 2006 interview with MTV, he gave his thoughts on how Elite Beat Agents was performing 1 month on from its release. "I have to say I'm a little personally disappointed," he said. "The sales are strong and good. I personally thought it was going to be explosive. The consumers I've talked to who have it, love it." Ouendan and Elite Beat Agents have since received some representation in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, with some of their characters appearing as unlockable spirits. Innes, who jointly owns the IPs with Nintendo, oversaw their implementation into the game, providing feedback when necessary. According to Yano, Innes has no plans to develop for the Nintendo Switch themselves, but the director has only good things to say about the platform.
I think the Nintendo Switch hardware is a great piece of hardware. I see lots of kids, playing with their friends, and they do just like it's on the commercials, right?
Yeah.
They prop the stand up and hold a controller in each hand and playing. So But yeah, if there's ever the right opportunity, obviously would love to, do something on it.
While the curtain appears to have quietly closed on the series, its developers still cherish the memories of their time working on it.
Working on Elite Beat Agents early in my career, it was a really lucky experience, and this was the game that made me cry during development, but in a good way. Basically, every morning, we go into the office and you'd grab the latest data, and I saw, we have this new stage came in, and it was the one with the baseball player. And we have the intro story was put together, and I start, of course, curious. I gotta look at it, and I watch the story, and these are all very cliche stories, but that's kind of what you have to love about the game. And it has the washed up baseball player who kind of got into a slump and ended up leaving the game, but he's still he can't quite let go, so he's sweeping the floors at the stadium as a janitor, and then like some kid recognizes him. It's like, oh, aren't you Strong Arm Jones, or whatever the name of the character was? He's like, oh wait, aren't you so and so? And you see the baseball player just pull his hat down. It's like, nah, you got the wrong guy, kid. And I was totally unprepared for just having that little emotional kick. It's not something that would normally make you cry, but I was sort of I was unprepared for it, because I was thinking oh, I'm gonna get ready to just do some work soon. Just let's see what's in there. And this moment just kind of kicked me, and I remember having a little tear, noticing that there's a tear in the corner of my eye. And I wiped it away. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm at work crying. What the heck? Damn game, make me cry. All the game dev that I've done since then, that's one of the things I've tried to figure out how I can have again. I want to have that moment again where I am so into what I'm making that it literally brought tears to my eyes. And this was sort of the experience for the whole game, where everyone really, really cared about it. That's why Nintendo of America made shirts for us. There's that one particular NOA team. They made these kind of these one-off shirts. Which, as far as I know, only the Innis dev members and certain people at NOA have those particular shirts, which is why I never wear that t-shirt except for super special occasions, because I want it to last forever, because this game, I really love the game, really love working on the game.
Today, Innis lives on through its successor company, Innis J, working with various publishers on games for consoles, arcades, and mobile platforms. For more content like this, please don't forget to subscribe. You can support my research on Patreon like these kind people did. I've been Liam, and I hope you'll join me for another Game History Secrets.